Welcome to the World Builders Anvil, episode 331. Fallout TV. The good, the bad, the ugly.
See, I would have just called it the good, the bad, and the Jeff.
Don't know where to start building your fantasy world?
Do you need more? Does it make sense?
Forget any worries and become a crafter of imagination.
This is the place where we will prime your mind.
Now, it's time to heat up the forge.
Break out the mithril ingots and hammer.
Welcome to the World Builders Anvil. I'm Jeffrey W. Ingram.
And I'm Michael Miller.
Let's sup from the muck of Java and build. Welcome back. Bug Zappers, as always, my name is Jeffrey W. Ingram.
200 amps strong, I am Michael Miller.
Anyone who gets those jokes in the context of being Michael are allowed to write in.
Oh, yeah.
You explain it, I will give you a shout out.
Yeah, Jeff and I had some fun conversation before we started the show, and I'm not even gonna
I don't want to
it.
explain that. So
Yeah, no. Again, see, what's funnier is there's a lot of audio that you guys don't get access to that is just Jeff and I messing around before and after the show. There's also a lot of audio that was never recorded. So, like, I don't even know if any of that was actually recorded. Yeah. So, yeah, but I think some of it might have been. I don't know. But there was some funny things, so anyway.
Sometimes when you do the editing, you remember things and go, oh, that was really funny. I forgot about that already, but yes.
I'm very excited about this episode, and appropriately, it was Jeff's introduction because we're going to be talking about Fallout, and Jeff is a huge fan of the Fallout series, which is great because although I love the concept of Fallout, I have not played a lot of Fallout, even though I think I own 2 of them. Before we get started on that, though, I have owed shout-outs for a while now. Shout-outs! So a lot of you have been joining the closed Facebook group, and I've been meaning to do this for like 2 or 3 episodes, but haven't gathered the names together, and I've done so, and it is a long list, everybody. So please bear with me, and if your shout-out is here, I apologize. It's been a long time coming, but here we go. So thank you for joining the closed Facebook group to Grayson, John, Bryn, and this is actually in reverse order. It's easier for me to write it down in reverse order. So Grayson joined the most recently compared to the names I get to at the end of the list. So if you joined a little while ago but have not heard your name on previous shows, just wait a second. I'll probably get to it. Grayson.
Tell us online if we forget.
Yes, please do. So Grayson, John, Bryn. I think that's Bryn. There's a few names in here that might be a little tough. Kieran, I believe it is. Kieran, Ryan, Matt, Ken, Nathaniel, Willer, Michael, Justin, Juanito. I'm gonna say that this name is Yemen or Ymen. It's Ymen. Tyler, Nolan, Samuel, Andrew, Dane. I'm not sure if this is Megan or I'm not sure. I don't remember the last name.
Character from a book, so it's probably not.
Fair enough. I don't know if this is Megan or Megan because it's Meagan. So Megan or Megan. Derek. We have a page that joined us. Visions of Noel or Nol. I'm not sure if
is that like
one.
Noel, like a monster Noel? Or?
No, it's Nol.
Okay.
So it's not Knoll, which would be the monster. Oh, yeah, you're correct. What am I thinking of? I'm thinking of.
Correct, but.
Well, isn't there a K? Isn't there a K one?
It's K sound, but it's G. It's one of those like.
Wouldn't that be Wouldn't that be a lack of K sound since it's silent? It's a silent. It is a silent G, isn't it?
Yeah, I guess it's Null. There's no K sound. It would be Knoll.
Yeah, because that would be Knoll. Like Knights. I don't know. I have more names. I believe it's Paria, or I don't think it's unless it's a. I don't think it's a jestful pariah, or maybe that is how it's pronounce, but Priya. I have Emiliana, I believe, Emiliana. Sheila, there's a person with the name Yo. We have Linda, Elizabetha, Karina, Spencer, and Constance. So all of you, thank you so much for joining the closed Facebook group. Sorry it has taken me so long to shout out your names. We have just not gathered the data until now. So
Well, I gathered it weeks ago, but Michael just is like, no, I'll never do it. And they would slap me.
it's totally true if you believe all of Jeff's lies.
My lies, then it's true.
And he does lie. So, little bit on Fallout. If you're not familiar, Fallout started out as a Steven Jackson project, actually. It was supposed to be a GURPS video game originally. It was designed with the GURPS system in mind, and it was supposed to be a total Steve Jackson property, and then there was a separation on it. And we're talking like the very first Fallout when it was like pseudo top-down, like
they call it third person.
I was going to get to that. I was going to say it was kind of like Diablo. When the first Fallout came out, that's what it was going to be. And I was so excited about it because back then I was playing more computer games, and I'm a huge fan of Steve Jackson. So I was really, really excited about what they were going to do with it.
That's actually what caught my attention to the series, because they said it was...
And thankfully, I don't know what's going on mathematically in the background of the game, but seeing more recent Fallouts, because I never did play the original, it does seem that it was designed either on the GURPS system or something very similar, because mathematically, yeah, it seems very, very similar or true to the way GURPS works. And to be able to do that in a game is, rewarding and awesome, because, like, specifically with GURPS and with any tabletop game, of course, but you can call your shots. You can be like, okay, well, I'm going to shoot at this enemy. Okay, fine. If you don't, say what you're going to do, then you're just generically shooting at the enemy. But with GURPS, you could say, okay, well, I'm going to try shooting them in the head, or shoot them in the arm or the foot or the leg, the knee, whatever. And you can do that in Fallout. Like, you can target specific areas of the body. And they did that early on with the game, which was impressive at the time. Other games weren't doing, not a whole lot of other games were doing things like that. So, but I didn't really start playing Fallouts until some of the newer versions, and it was a game that I really, really wanted to get into, but didn't. Like, I started playing it, and I didn't get super into it, but Jeff did.
Yeah, a little bit. No, I bought the first Fallout back in blah blah AD, whatever that was. I don't remember.
I think it was like what, the late 90s was.
No, I think it was the 80s, maybe the early 90s.
Did it? No.
Yeah,
the first one
after I got out of the service, I think. So I think somewhere.
I didn't get into Steve Jackson until the 90s, so it was definitely after that.
Well, I introduced you to Steve Jackson's.
No, you didn't.
I brought it. Well, or you trust me. You got into Steve Jackson because of me. It might not have been directly because of me, but I brought Steve Jackson to our groups.
Wrong, and I will take you to task on this hard, because I was into Steve Jackson back in like my junior year of high school, because my friend John introduced me to GURPS, not you. You do not get credit for that.
Like, what, 20 years younger than me?
Not 20 years younger. I'm like 5 years younger than you.
Everyone who plays GURPS today.
Okay, all right. I see what you're doing. Okay. Big shout out to my friend John, who
I think John,
introduced me to.
Know later.
John introduced me to Cyberpunk. He introduced me to GURPS, and that was a really huge stepping stone
John who lived with,
in my.
Nate for a while?
Lived with Nate for a while.
Up at Enfield?
No, I don't. I don't know who you're referring to, but definitely not this John.
Okay, definitely.
This was a John. This was a John who I went to high school with. A real good friend of mine.
Did you not go? You were not an Enfield kid either.
No, I was a Summers kid. I did live in Enfield at one point, but But that was after I moved back. Like I didn't live in Enfield until after I moved back from
gotcha,
Ark.
got it. All right. And now people have a little bit of
This is a long-winded way of saying that you are no influence to me. You never have been.
Well, I pretty much I made GURPS the fantasy standard for years with most of my friends because a lot of my friends are like me. They're world builders, and one of the problems with Dungeons and Dragons is the system is very dependent. The system and the world are married, and it's hard to pull out parts and have it work as a whole. Where if you use a universal system, you can choose a bit more.
And I can't speak to the newer D&D systems. I think they're up to? Are they up to 5 now?
5 came out, and actually, I got the box set. I'm going to actually look at it because it seems super popular, like the most popular thing ever.
Yeah, I can't speak to the newer systems. Even 4, like the last I was playing D&D, I think was in 3, and I was never a big fan of it, mostly because the game worked off of numbers, and it prioritize the numbers, so you could game the system. So like if you're up against an enemy, getting back to talking about targeting, if you're up against an enemy, it's like, okay, well, this is a powerful enemy, it's got 1 billion hit points, be like, okay, well, I have this sword that only does 20 hit points, but I'm going to cut his head off, and you roll successfully, you're like, okay, great, you cut his head off, but it only does 20 damage, and he's still very much alive because he has 1 billion hit points. That's how it was way back in the day.
Yeah.
It didn't take into consideration the realistic possibilities of,
Unless you like a Vorpal sword.
Well, yeah, but we're not getting into that. But the point is that with GURPS, it's like, okay, well, there is a certain amount of health, there is a certain amount of damage that things can do, but there's also the possibility of critical strikes that can do an instant kill. Like it was just more realistic.
You could go to instant kills very quickly, and sometimes people were surprisingly resilient, and it would be on how you built your character. I remember one guy, one of our friends, Ian, I think, was playing a character who got into a battle with a Phalanx Demon, which I think we've talked very briefly about Phalanx Demons. I named them after a military formation for a reason. One of these things is a little army. And the group did not kill this Phalanx Demon.
And how physically large is a Phalanx Demon? Are we talking about like the size of an SUV, the size of a house?
I'd say weight-wise, they're probably about 3,000 pounds. They're about 12 foot tall.
Okay.
Not including the spikes.
So of course, yeah, I know there's appendages and things that stick out. So we're talking like basically like 2 cars.
Yeah.
Roughly. Okay.
Two cars put together, and the character he was playing was a big character, a big burly fighter character.
Right.
And this was not a min-max character. He was built to be tough because that was kind of his thing. He was a survivor. And he got caught up in a fight against one of these Phalanx Demons, which you're not meant to win. You're meant to survive. And luckily, it got bored and it went to fly away. He jumps on the thing. Now, the spines I'm talking about are actually all have a corrosive venom on them as well. So he's taking damage just trying to grapple with the thing, and he took, I want to say, almost 5 times his health and damage. Because in GURPS, once you go below your health, you roll to see if you're knocked unconscious, and then if you go your amount of health below, then it's like health, it's like knockout and death rolls every time you reach your health again, up to 5 times. I know it wasn't 5 times because 5 times is permadeath.
Yeah.
Your body's too mangled. The interesting thing was he got very close to that number and he finally passed out. But he was he had I believe a high pain threshold.
And didn't he also, upon passing out, wasn't this thing in flight and he plummeted?
It was in flight and he flew and he was literally, I think, 1 or 2 hit points away from being just dead. And the permadeath was the ultimate. But it was one of those things too where it was actually a bad roll at this point because he was a little upset because he was playing his character, but he kind of wanted to take his character off this thing, but his character was caught up in the moment. He rolled really well. It almost cost him his character.
I've had those moments where you're like, okay, this is what my character would do, but it stinks because he's about to die.
And you would vocalize that during the parts. You just kind of, I think, want people to know, okay, I'm not an idiot here, but my character's going to do this.
Yeah. Because I remember there were some people that you play with that don't get what you're doing, and it's like, dude, I'm doing what he would do. Of course, I don't want to do it.
Yes.
What do you mean you want to slap the captain of the guard? Yes, I slap the captain of the guard.
Dave Hawkins was playing essentially Daishan Malclear, he called him, which are names I didn't recognize at the time, but they're from Wheel of Time, I believe. That must be where he got them from. And but he was essentially playing a paladin in GURPS, and he actually felt true remorse after combat because he killed people. It was a very interesting take, and I remember he was grossed out by being dirty. It was like his one of his character flaws, and to a really serious mental health issue way. And so there's part of the adventure, they're going through a jungle, and they come out in essentially a holy glaive, and it was one of those things they're like holy symbols hanging throughout here. It's holy people standing right by this pool of water doing rituals. His character fails his role because he's filthy. He walks right into the holy pool and starts to take a bath. And of course, they didn't appreciate that. The fun moments in role playing games, but
Dave always
talking
had
about a video
some.
game one here called Fallout, and it's interesting. It's an interesting series, and we'll talk a little bit. We've talked about it in the past, and we'll talk about it a little bit here, especially when we start talking more about going forward. But in a way, this episode, which is timely, not only for what because something is actually happening, and we're talking about it. We're recording it a couple of days after the news dropped, which for us it's usually at least 6 months before we talk about stuff, before we realize it. Being topical is not always one of our best subjects because we're both very busy. It's not like when we were younger and paying attention to stuff. And Michael knows certain things because he follows. I know certain things because I follow. Google is getting good enough to where it fed me this right away. Even though it's I love Fallout. But there's some interesting things to talk about here. One, who are the players in this? Obviously, Bethesda Studios. It is from the creators of Westworld, whatever the name of their studio is, and Amazon Studios. I believe it's planned to be a TV series.
All companies that do really fine work.
Or have in the past have proven. It's Westworld, the first season of Westworld was one of the best seasons of television I've seen. I don't.
Correct me if I'm wrong. You still haven't watched Breaking Bad?
Breaking Bad. I don't even know that.
Oh man, you gotta watch that show.
What's Breaking Bad?
All right, keep going.
Okay.
So,
I guess
first season of Westworld, one of the best things ever.
Yeah. Well, it was a really well created season on every level, acting, story,
Good world
special
building.
effects, all amazing. Now. The history, though, isn't so good here. So let's kind of go into the good, the bad, the ugly. Not just Fallout, but just in general, this idea from last episode too, changing stories, changing mediums. There's always a risk when you do that. I would argue video games in general don't lend well to this. Things that were created for video games struggle in going to a medium that is deeper, whether it be novels or movies or TV shows. And the problem is when you create something for a video game, you create a superficial level of it that you need for the game. You might get into great depths in anything that's needed for the game, but everything else is vacuous. The stories are typically vacuous, if they're existent at all. And a lot of times the stories are player versus. If you play out a Fallout or an Elder Scrolls game, especially you could completely skip the stories and just kind of go out and wander around. So you can't really recreate games like that in general. SimCity would make a fabulous movie, I would argue, but that's maybe just me.
Are you being sarcastic with that one, or?
Yeah.
Okay. You said it so seriously with only a small smile, not your telling, grin.
Not my usual obvious sarcasm.
Yeah.
My subtle.
More subtle for you, yeah.
Yeah, which is not saying much. I'm usually not very subtle. So.
Well, I mean, with this medium, you kind of have to be a little obvious so that people understand what and pick up. Well,
It's kind of good sometimes when you ask me that, because it's more for the audience. Michael knows me.
Yeah, it is.
So
Sometimes,
it's more for you guys.
yeah, that's true. I do that a lot. I'll ask you to clarify or whatever, and it's not usually for me. It's usually for them. The thing that's funny is like I love a very dry delivery, and I don't use that on the show very often. At least I don't think I do. But I have people that I've worked with over the years where I've worked with them for like 10 years and could still say things in a fashion where they'd be like thinking I'm serious and then look at me sideways and be like, what do you mean? Like, don't you? And then they would realize, oh, you're kidding. You know, it would crack me up because it's the one person in particular that comes to mind where I would say things that were so outlandish, but because I would say it so straight-faced, they would totally take me seriously, and I'd be like, how do you believe that what I'm saying is serious?
And the good thing is, like, I think a lot of like my good friends have that ability, where they can get so dry at times. Like, even though you know them really well, sometimes you might even question. We have one in particular, and we won't get into
Jim,
who's exceptionally well educated.
I was just gonna say Jim is very good at it.
But yes, but me, the double whammy I use is I'm typically so Indiana over obvious when I talk about stuff that when I decide to use that side of myself, it's maybe more effective than it would be if I didn't have my over rambunctious side. So that probably actually aids me in hiding a bit. But
Now, you said.
But let's get back into the topic.
You said something a second ago that I wanted to key up on. It makes me want to read a video game book, and I can't think of one off the top of my head. I've never.
I never read any books from video games.
Well, I know, but you said something to the effect of that it probably wouldn't work well, and that made me think: did you read a video game based book?
I know there are some, but I would argue that the ones that are probably good probably aren't because of the medium they started in. No, I've not really read it.
Well, because my thought is, I would bet that you can make a good book. I would bet that that's a good media transition. And media transition is part of what we're talking about today, like not just about Fallout specifically, but also in the technical limitations, pros and cons of moving one property from one medium to another.
Yeah, most definitely. And it's like, for me, the problem is it's the style of medium storytelling. Once again, you're going from something where you have player agency to something without. TV, movies, books don't have true player agency. And so the problem is, especially if you take a game that has great player agency, like a Fallout game, especially the older you get, there's a lot of variety of types of gameplay, the way you interact with factions within the game. It's huge, the differences that you can have in the running through the same game, even though doesn't have the great sort of, super clever branching, multiple ending type of games. There's a little bit of that in them, but it's just the way you play and interact in the game world itself is very unique to your play style and the relationships you develop. There are typically some branching stuff here and there, and a couple of endings potentially mixed in, but that wasn't what the game was trying to do. It was trying to create a world that was dark, and this is one of the problems it's going to have. And actually, Fallout has this problem, and this is a Fallout problem in general. Is every Fallout game has a different feel, and so.
Do you mean technically or story wise?
Well, technically, from the Interplay to the Bethesda games are
true, absolutely.
But that's not so much what I meant. It's Fallout 1 is truly a dark game. Humor is in the game, but it's black humor. So it's very rarely meant to be silly. As in relief from the environment. It was more humor derived from being in that environment for so long. That's kind of my takedown. But now that all changed when the second one came out. The second one had like New Reno, and it kind of had these over the top moments in there, which kind of is good because it takes you away from the harshness of the post apocalyptic world, and in a fun kind of campy way. So I'm not going to argue what's better, but I would argue people would say from Fallout to Bethesda, from Interplay to Bethesda, it's two different games. I say all of the games I've played so far have been different. And sometimes it's a tweak, but they're different. You know, the Fallout 3 and probably New Vegas are the most similar. Even though I think New Vegas did a little bit better with factions and some of the gameplay side of it, probably because it built off of the Fallout 3. But the way the world was exposed was a bit more similar than even from 3 to 4. 4 would really try to streamline it and make it more casual play, less role play. The new idea that role-playing games are just about leveling your character. No, that's something that has been taken from role-playing games and is used in other games now, but that is not what a role-playing game really is. It's about the character interactions. So I hate how they talk about role-playing games, and they call some games role-playing games, and they're not even close. For me, role-playing is about interacting a character in a story. And just leveling your character in an FPS game does not make it a role-playing element. It just makes
it's a leveling,
to build your character.
Let me ask you this: are you excited about this TV show? Like, are you looking forward to it in any way, or just out of a morbid curiosity?
Yes. No, I think it has potential. I think the players are right. I don't think Bethesda would easily give up access to a franchise. I know that they've had offers to make post-apocalyptic stuff in Fallout before. At least they've said that they have. So I think that they're picky. My only fear, and this goes under the ugly, is Fallout 76. Fallout 76 has been an unmitigated disaster.
Really?
Maybe with the new Wastelanders expansion, it's maybe a Fallout game now. But the problem was, and I'm glad I didn't play it. I was suspicious from the beginning. It sounded like they were making a survival horror game in the Fallout world, and it just didn't interest me. So I didn't get caught up in a lot of the glitches and then those kind of problems when the game came out. When it came out, I'm like, it just reinforced it wasn't the game I wanted to play. If it had tried to be an MMO, I probably would have tried it. If they had come out with a Wastelanders with the NPCs worked in from the beginning, I probably would have given it a shot. I'm not interested in playing survival games. It's just I don't have enough time to spend hundreds of hours to grind out crap anymore. Those weren't probably ever my kind of game anyway. So. But I'm a little worried that part of it is they think the brand is tarnished. So one, maybe it's a good time to take the shot. You're not going to hurt the brand more if it comes out and it's a lackluster. If it has average reviews, it's not going to pull you down anymore. Because I think, even though a lot of people didn't like Fallout 4 as much as the other ones because it was a little bit less role-playing inclined as the older games, I think it increased its audience size, and it was probably, I think it's still a really popular brand after Fallout 4 came out. I enjoyed playing Fallout 4. It was not as good of a game, I don't think, as the other ones, but I really enjoyed it was the best shooter version of the game so far. It had the best combat of any of them, which Michael plays those kind of games more and probably would still find it clunky compared to like the first-person shooter games that he plays.
Yeah, I play a lot of Destiny and a little bit of Call of Duty here and there.
Yeah, and I know if you try to play Fallout 3 strictly as a first-person shooter, it would drive you nuts because it wasn't very good at that. You needed VATS in that one to make the gunplay fair for you. At least till you had 5 levels and then were basically invincible.
Unless what?
But you had like 5 or 10 levels and then you were basically invincible.
5 or 10 levels of
the character levels. In the more recent Bethesda games, you get a few levels, and stuff just seems to stop. When they try and scale enemies, there's never really truly powerful enemies. It's just not the risk. Now, you can play on the super hard level where a rat looks at you, and it crits you for 500 points of damage, and you die 5,000 times at level 1. But that's not fun for me either. I kind of prefer, like, old Morrowind-style interactions where the monsters were the levels that the monsters were. More powerful monsters tended to congregate together, and if you went to the wrong spot at wrong level, you got your
Yeah. The thing, Destiny does a good job with scaling enemies. It's kind of funny because we were doing something recently where we were revisiting an old area of the game, and we had been reading something like oh yeah, now it's not that bad. Like if you go in there now, because when it was originally set up, you had to have a level of like 700, and now characters are over 1,000 because they increased the cap. But you go in there now and you'll still get your butt handed to you. Like it, like it scales appropriately, so it's still really hard.
I've still not played enough Elder Scrolls Online to be an authority, but I think they must do a lot better with scaling in that game, because it's like my wife.
That's also Bethesda, right?
Spend a lot of times.
Okay.
That's like the parent studio, so that's like an online ZeniMax game, but it's based on the Bethesda studio game, but it's a different company under the umbrella of ZeniMax, but it's obviously they're connected. It's the same parent company, the same people who publish it. But and it feels like playing an Elder Scrolls game now, which when I tried it in beta, it did not. So I stopped playing it. My wife and I enjoy it. We play a couple of hours most weeks. But the thing is, when we're going through these newbie areas for the first time, and you go through, and it's more of an action RPG game instead of a traditional tab MMORPG. So it has more of the feel of playing like the console games. And the cool thing is when you're doing that, is that you'll see what's obviously a really powerful character next to you. If you click on them, it's like they have much higher stats, but they seem to be in the same areas. So I think that there must be good scaling there. And I do know, MMOs have a tendency to where you would grind and go back because you need, to build up certain things. So you have to go to this one area for 10,000 days. But it could just be that. But I think the scaling must work pretty well because the monsters always seem somewhat competitive wherever we've gone so far. But some are really hard, and you have to actually really use your move and dodge. Because it's not your typical MMORPG. So some games get better at that. The thing that I think Bethesda brings to the table here is the lore of the world is rich. But it gives a lot of chances for variation because it's post-apocalyptic. You don't have the connection in the United States that you would have, in any other game. So if you have new factions and new things that show up, but you set your Fallout TV series in Chicago, I don't know if anything's ever happened in Chicago in a video game. I could be wrong, but let's say Chicago hasn't been touched yet. You could have whole new, even powerful factions there. That haven't shown up in the first two games or in the last two games or in any of the little weird things that have come out in between.
The thing that...
so it gives you some opportunity.
The thing that I find discouraging about when they take a property, and it's almost always a video game to movie, right? Where you've got a video game that you love, and then they say, oh, we're going to make a movie of this. And it's almost always a disappointment, especially... comic books are the same way. Only in recent years have they been able to start putting some of the comic book stories together that have been really good. And the exception is the DC animated movies. The DC animate they have been fantastic for a long time, and I've been saying it for years. Would DC please just allow whoever is in charge of doing all the animated ones to let them have the live action department? Just say, look, here's the script. Just shoot this. You know what I mean? Like, we have the technology. Just shoot this. Tell them to say these things.
Let's redo this.
There's so many great animated movies. They're all so high quality. Anyway, so with
and there's Wonder Woman.
Wonder Woman was excellent. I'm not saying that we are completely devoid of good comic book movies. I'm not saying that by any stretch. What I am saying is most of the time when they take a comic book and move it to a live action, and I'm not talking about just a character. I'm talking about if they say we're going to take this specific story and make it into a movie, it's usually nowhere near as good. With video games, when they take a video game story or world or the whole thing and move it to a movie, it is almost always not that good. And it's always a disappointment because you know that they have a rich well to pull from. You know, like, you know, you've got and you could even take some of the paper thin wells. You could be like, well, Street Fighter and Mortal Kombat. Like, these games were these games were not story heavy. These games, when they were made, Street Fighter was like mostly caricature, you know, stereotypes of characters, and Mortal Kombat, I mean, they just threw all that stuff together. Like but
they threw all the stuff around the dismemberment.
But since then, they had created a mythology. Both of those games have deep, rich background stories now. And even at the time, they could have done something better than what they did. So when you start moving into games when you start moving to games that do have a thick background, it's like, okay, this should be easy. Like, you guys have so much to pull from. You should be able to make something solid here. So where's the breakdown? Why is it that when you have a rich world, like, I'm trying to think of what would be a good example that would be a mid-range, like something that came, because, you know, I mean, of course, we've talked about off the show, we've talked about the Mario Brothers movie. So that would be a case where the Mario Brothers world is a very strange but very distinct world. Like, it has its own logic, it has its own art, it has, you know, now there's a lot to it. When they created that movie, there wasn't a whole lot to it. I think when that movie came out, they had gotten to Mario 3 maybe, about, roughly.
Maybe, yeah.
So they'd established enough to pull from to create something. And they didn't take from the well they had. They created their own well, and it was a train wreck.
I think here's the thing, you know, is a lot of times, you know, studios they're looking for money, so they're looking for low cost for high return on value, which means they don't put the money into it that they should.
Yeah, but the Mario Brothers movie was not a cheap movie.
And a lot of times it's not that. Like, a lot of these DC movies coming out now have great directors, great cast, and they blow chunks. And I think the problem is a lot of times, though, when they decide to invest the money and the resources to do it right, they get more nervous that if they don't have, you know, super director A or super actor B, who aren't necessarily even good for the roles, or they don't even necessarily know or love the thing that they're making, which you need to. That's the thing that you need. You know, that's the reason why Joss Whedon does a good job, is he loves, whenever he gets involved, he loves the canon, you know. And so, and he understands he can't bring it all there, but he tries to draw from the canon to tell the story that he's presenting. But, you know, the problem is that you bring in some of these directors and they have their own dark. It's like The Dark Knight was done well. It could have been a lot better, you know. But the director who created this super dark version of Batman, you know, the problem was, you know, he was creating what he wanted for his world. The guy they brought in to do Superman, he was creating his thing there. He wanted his footprint on it, instead of going, you know what, I want to have my footprint pulled into the canon. And the good news is, for this, one of the things that gives me some promise to the Fallout TV show is supposedly the creators working on it, at least one of them, has played all of the games, knows all of the games, loves all of them.
Now that is very encouraging.
And the thing is, thematically, you can pull in from the darkness, which, if you watch Westworld, is sort of a dark vision of the future, a different way, but a dark vision of the future as well. Hell, that could be a Fallout experiment.
I don't think to call Westworld a dark vision of the future is appropriate. I think it's more appropriate to say it is a dark version of humanity. It is a very stark look at the worst of humanity. And it doesn't necessarily have to be in the future. It just happens. It happens to be in the future because the technology they're working with is very futuristic. But what they're doing doesn't necessarily have to be set in the future. It is a very ugly look at humanity.
Yeah, no, I say you could set this in ancient Rome. You could set it in modern day anywhere.
And they did, and it was called Spartacus.
That
was a great show, and also really dark.
Recent efforts, there have been some good. I have to give The Witcher. I haven't seen it yet, but I've heard good things.
I have been trying to start that. I haven't been able to convince my wife to get into it, and I want to watch it, but I will admit that the trailers that I have watched for it and the sequences, like I've seen a few sequences, have not impressed me. So,
well, from what I've heard is if you're not familiar with the lore, it's a slow start. But it got the overall product is good, but it was kind of a slow start if you don't know the lore. But here's the difference between Witcher and say like Resident Evil. Witcher was a novel series that was licensed to be a video game, and then after that, and is actually working with the author, not.
Well, that's what I was going to say. The show is pulled off the books, not the game.
So you can argue that's more of a Game of Thrones scenario then. So I don't know how good that one is. I can't say I can think of any good movies based off of video games. Resident Evil being one where
you can't think of any. You can't think of any good video games.
I might not just be that turn into a movie.
I will admit that I have not seen the most recent Tomb Raider, but it does look solid. I don't know. I don't know.
That's one that should have the ability, right?
Well, the thing, it looks very much like, I don't know, did you play the newest one or the newest two?
I've not.
It's very good. It's very good, and the movie looks a lot like that game. So, but again, I don't know if the story's any good because I haven't seen it yet.
Yeah. I don't know. And like I said, there could be ones. I've not seen them all. I don't try. But from the ones I have seen.
Stepping to the Resident Evil for a second, most of what happens in the movies is not. It's only kind of vaguely. It touches on things from the games. They don't directly correlate with the games, and they are action spectacles. They are not good stories.
They're not.
No.
They're not really stories. And this is my problem. Like Resident Evil. I'm not a huge fan of playing, like I said, like horror games. But that should be a game you would think, like Fallout, should translate.
It should. And I will say this. Yeah. I do think they're good in their own right. Let's say it. Allow me to say it very specifically. The Resident Evil video games and the Resident Evil movies, while there's a lot of character crossover, there's a lot of characters that are in the games that are in the movies, but like the adventures are different. They're not directly correlated. They're not trying to take this is Resident Evil 1 or this is Resident Evil 2, the video game, and this is our movie version of that thing. They did not do that. Mm-hmm. So if you just take a look at here's a Resident Evil world and characters and storyline, and here is video game, and here is the Resident Evil world, characters, storyline, movies, they're pretty comparable because they're both ridiculous. Like the stories in Resident Evil are ridiculous. They're fun. They're great to play. They're action. A lot of them are action filled or suspense filled. Like there are the older ones were much more suspenseful and much more survival horror, hard to get through. The newer ones are way more actiony. Much more. With the exception of number 5, I think it is number 5, the one that they go back. Yeah, it's apparently. And I've only played a little bit of not number 5, number 6, the newest one. They have a VR version of it, and it's scary as hell. So the movies are ridiculous, very thin plot action spectacles. So in the avenue of they're ridiculous, sure, that falls in with Resident Evil. In the bit where they're kind of thin, you have more time in a video game to create. I will say that the stories in the Resident Evil video games are complicated. I wouldn't say they're very deep, but they're complex though. Yeah. So like you have a lot of moving parts and a lot of interconnected characters. But it's not real deep. Whereas
the more difficult thing in video games is typically, like I said, it's not the depth. You can put so many characters in there. It's hard to everything.
Yeah, definitely. And the movies, you don't have as much complexity. You do have some weird connections, like this character, that character, and why they're tied, and like there is some very weird things going on in the movies, but they're really more about the special effects, the action. It's not story heavy. So even though there is a thread, like there is, I think every single one of them has Mila Jovovich in it as the same character or a clone of the same character. So
I heard the next one they're gonna have another clone of the Emperor from Star Wars.
oh yeah, that's gonna be cool. I can't wait. I think there's gonna be two. There's gonna be a good one and a bad one with like really high midichlorian count, and the other one is like a white. Emperor. Yeah, the other one's like a whitewashed version from the old Republic. So it should be interesting. Yeah. See, okay, that right there, they should take. Yeah, sorry that it was a little. You're right. That was all of that was me messing with you guys. They should take the story from Knights of the Old Republic and make those a movie or show. Knights of the Old Republic, the first game, has a fantastic story. You do not have to use, and I'm not even talking about you don't even have to take all of the characters and all the things. All you have to do is tell the story of Darth Revan. That is a great story. That story by itself would make a good movie. Yep. Darth Revan and Darth Malak.
And as I said, I here's my general breakdown: is I've not seen a video game movie I've liked. That's good. Sometimes I've liked them. Like I actually enjoyed the first.
I was about to say the first Mortal Kombat movie was a great watch.
It was a great watch.
Yeah, exactly. I was gonna say I'm not saying it's a great movie, but it was a great watch.
Yeah. But the Mario movie, yeah, not so much. It's Planet from outer space. Better than Glen or Glinda, but not as good as Planet Nine.
Well, I mean, really, is anything?
No. But Street Fighter did have. Oh, who was the guy from the Addams Family? He was terrific.
Oh, come on, Raul Julia. And here's the sad truth is Raul Julia was an amazing actor, and Street Fighter was his last movie before he passed. It is not the note. It was not the note that he should have gone out on.
But he was terrific in the movie. But it shows terrific actors can't make bad movies. No, he was terrific.
Here's the thing, and I've said this before, and my specific example is usually Keanu Reeves. If you watch an actor do an amazing performance, and we can agree now that Keanu Reeves is a fantastic actor, but there was a long time period where no one felt that way. There was a long time period where he put a lot of weak performances out there. And he does something like The Matrix, where he forget just the kung fu and all the hard physical work that he did. He put in a really great performance for that movie. And you see any actor, not just Keanu Reeves, but any actor, they'll put out a really great performance for a particular movie, and you'll be like, wow, they're really good. And then you see them in another movie made at about the same time, and they're terrible. That's not the actor. Actors are told to do something, and they do it. The director...
Sometimes they can make up for a
yes,
bad
they can.
Script by improvising if the director will allow them.
And if the editor puts those things in the movie, because there's a lot of influences. But the point is that when you see an actor do something amazing and do something terrible, odds are that's the influence of the director. Like a good director. Yeah, exactly. A good director can pull an amazing performance out of an actor. A bad director can make a great actor look terrible. So when you watch a movie and you're like, oh man, I was really looking forward to this. This guy's so great, i.e. Raul Julia in Street Fighter, he's awesome. But that movie was terrible. They didn't have a script day to day when they were shooting. They were writing that movie while they were shooting it. They didn't, day to day, they didn't know where they were in the story. Jean-Claude Van Damme was doing a lot of cocaine on that movie. And he was also cheating on his wife with one of his co-stars. Like, there was all kinds of drama and craziness on the set of Street Fighter, and it's not surprising that the movie is so terrible.
But, sort of overall, though, looking at future properties coming out, because the one thing superhero movies have proven is it's possible. And sometimes it takes them a while to get to where they're right, even if they get lucky once or twice along the way. The thing is, it's like something like Fallout has great potential. One is, as a rich world, it has strong, identifiable themes that go across all. The idea of the dark survival style world, with small pockets of humanity trying to survive against the world that the greed of humanity has almost destroyed, and is still trying to. And the thing that makes that really an awesome idea for a world, I mean, that's Mad Max. Some great stories have come out of there. Humanity, we like that kind of stuff because you live in a world that's so perfect like ours. You couldn't think of an apocalypse like say a disease come through and wait, that might not work because of that right now, but it might hit but I'm sure this one won't be out for years because it's just been inked. But the thing is, people there's a potential in the lore alone. They cannot remake Fallout 3, 1 or 2 or 4 or Fallout Tactics or Fallout for the Game Boy 7G VR experience. They can't remake the movies directly. And I think the biggest mistake would be we're going to just make Fallout 3 that story into a movie. Now, you could have it set in DC. You could even have it maybe overlap with what's happening in there. But the better thing to do is to take the lore, make your own stories. Maybe some of the character interactions is really smart to bring through. But you're going to reach whole new people in your audience who don't want to and will not play Fallout game afterwards. Or maybe they will play it afterwards but have not even played it or heard of it before. There are people who've seen The Witcher Netflix, I'm sure, who have no idea that there's even a Witcher video game series.
You know what, though? We're talking about some pretty dense games. I have a hard time believing that anybody that would pick up Fallout as a video game to try it isn't aware of it. Because anybody that would watch the TV show and go, "Oh, this is a game, let me try it," would probably be in over their head.
That's probably true as well. So, but
true. Okay. All right. I'll give you that.
But the simple fact being that there's not a great history in this, and anything related to movies or superheroes that come out, I'm still trepid on. For every Iron Man, or Spider-Man new version of Spider-Man that comes out, there is Captain America. And I don't mean...
I was about to say, okay, you're talking about the original old school, was it 1970s Captain America that was terrible? Or 80s? Yeah, somewhere
80,
in there.
Like early 80s or something like that, yeah. There is Green Lantern. DC, just do it right.
Yeah,
okay?
I love the Green Lantern too.
Stop it.
Give me Idris Elba Green Lantern, please.
I was hoping for Guy Gardner.
I like Guy Gardner. I'll take a Guy Gardner.
But the simple truth is, though, there is a lot of potential in some of these things. Like I said, I'd be very leery if they came out with SimCity the movie.
The Sims the movie. Look, they made an Angry Birds. They've made 2 Angry Birds movies. If they can make 2 Angry Birds movies,
and I've not seen those. They could.
My point is, if they can create something,
Lego.
Yeah. The Lego movies are fun.
So and they're fun video games. So
I think we just found the exception to the rule.
And the exception to the rule. There's a new War and Peace length novel.
War and Peace, Lego, Xbox, Lego Xbox War and Peace.
But yes, so the thing is, always be trepid going into anything that you know and love in the movie theaters, because just because it's possible of being good, and it doesn't mean it will be. Just because it has rich lore and looks like it could work as a story doesn't mean it will.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean they'll even follow that road. This one, I think, has all of the ingredients to be something at least good.
I would love to see them
maybe
make
something special.
the story of the first God of War faithful to the story in a movie format. That would be awesome. That would be fantastic.
So, you want to watch a movie about a demigod that suffers from PTSD?
He is a tragic anti-hero and a betrayed soldier and father.
Okay. I think I saw
You know what?
Whatever.
You know
There are
what?
no new plots.
Similar story.
Let's not get-
Similar story.
Yeah. And two very great properties. So seems like a story that's good to rip off.
All right, let's bring this in. We've been going for a while
That's
here.
all we have.
Do you have any clothing?
Take the full bill versus-
Clothing. Do you have any clothing thoughts, Jeff? Do you have any thoughts on clothing?
I did. My clothing thought is, you have to take these things one thing at a time, and I would be trepid because video games.
No clothing thoughts, Jeff.
have-
Clothing
also
thought. Do you have any thoughts on clothing? No.
No.
Try to match the colors.
No, I
Try to
don't wear those.
get complementary colors going. Neutral.
I
Well,
don't believe in clothes.
yeah. Yeah,
This
that's.
is why we're in audio.
I mean, you guys, I've mentioned it before. It's very hard to do this because what I look at and what Jeff forces me to look at in the video feed is sometimes scary, tragic, traumatizing, horrifying. I could go on. World builder task. You have create one story that would work for all media types without any changes. That seems like a really challenging task because no one else seems to be able to do it.
But I figure if you can, and then you can share this out and get it picked up in one meeting, you're going to be the most popular writer ever.
That would be great. And tell you what, that is a great task. You guys get on that. Come up with some sort of story that would work across all medias.
Now, for the real world task,
One
Michael and I
time.
have disagreed upon occasion in this episode. And if you agree with him, your real world task is to go watch the Mario movie over and over again until you realize
If you
it's
agree with Jeff,
That's it.
then go watch the what is the worst Resident Evil movie? I can't even remember number 2 or 3. So I can remember number 1, which it wasn't
remember
great,
it,
but it had some redeeming quality. So why don't we just randomly say go watch Resident Evil 3 until you realize that you're wrong? So either way, you're stuck watching a bad video game movie. Oh no, maybe we should say Street Fighter.
I hope you guys
That would be better. So your pick is Mario, my pick is Street Fighter. Because at least with Street Fighter, you don't even get the great visual of what's in the Resident Evil movies. True.
That's true. Because at least they had good special effects. So.
Better than Street
Or
Fighter.
at least better than Street Fighter from the 90s. All right, folks. We'll see you next week. Thank you so much for listening to the World Builders Anvil.
We would love it if you would share the World Builders Anvil with 2 of your friends.
And so would they.
If they are unfamiliar with podcasts, then you get to introduce them to the wonderful world of podcasting.
Take them to Stitcher or iTunes, or best of all, just send them to our website, www.gardul.com.
That's GARDUL.com.
Now strike while the mithril's hot.